In 2008, the General Conference of the United Methodist Church met in Fort Worth, Texas. And since I lived in Dallas, it was an easy thing for me to be assigned as one of the reporters for the United Methodist News Service and United Methodist Insight. I was a photographer for both of those entities, for United Methodist Insight especially, as well as for the UM Reporter and United Methodist News Service. And so I had the joy of going around the General Conference, of seeing people, of meeting people, of photographing the goings-on at legislative sessions and on the floor of the General Conference, going on the floor, taking pictures, soaking in the reality that was the highest-ranking conference of our denomination, of the United Methodist Church. And so it was both an eye-opening and a heart-opening and a mind-opening experience. I had a blast doing it. But I was also troubled by much of what I saw. I saw a denomination that was constantly fighting within itself, of people disagreeing and arguing, of not treating each other as sisters and brothers together, of not being open to each other, of arguing with each other, of verbally fighting with each other, and on occasion almost coming to actual physical blows. It was such a disappointing experience to walk through the halls of the General Conference and hear bitter words and sense the pain that was there, the pain of exclusion, the pain of rejection that was present and alive, and the talk of separation that had begun years before and was growing even then. It was painful because it was in stark contradiction to the slogan, the marketing campaign. Yes, I know it was a marketing campaign, but it was far more than that. It was a self-identification, an affirmational statement of who and what we are when we proclaimed open hearts and open minds and open doors, the people of the United Methodist Church. I can remember when we first established this as the slogan and the marketing campaign began, several members of the church I was serving at that time would come up to me and they would say, now, got to remember this is in southern Texas, all right? Brother Greg, there's a problem with that statement. You got to be careful that your mind isn't so open that your brains fall out. Oh. That, to me, that was so ironic. And part of me wanted to say, I didn't say then. Part of me wanted to say, yes, indeed, but it's better than taking your brain out and putting it on the shelf before going into the church. Ooh. Ooh. Open hearts, open minds, open doors. That was an aspirational statement for our church. What we wanted to be, the people we felt called to be. A people who would be open in heart to receiving all. A people who would be open in their minds to thinking and considering and discussing the questions, the hard questions. Questions that you couldn't ask other places. Questions that needed to be discussed. And open doors. And I think the last one was the one that bothered them the most. This idea of open doors, open to all. Even people who didn't look like or sound like or smell like or act like them. In fact, that's true for all of us. There are times when we get uncomfortable with the idea of open doors. For that means we have to give up control. We have to give up control and our say as to who gets to be here with us. We have to have an open heart to the people that God sends. We have to have an open mind to encountering them where they are rather than trying to change them letting God be the one in charge, and open doors to receiving them when they come. This was the message that governed the life of the early church, this openness, this presence of God. Openness to the presence of God in Jesus Christ. Openness to the presence of God in the Holy Spirit. Openness to the presence of God coming to us from everywhere. It says in the Scriptures that Jesus opened their minds to understanding the Scriptures and opened them to spread the message of the good news of the love of God, the message of the life, death, and resurrection of the Messiah to the entire world, to all nations, it says. That means Gentiles. That means people who are outside of the covenant community of the Hebraic people. People who've been outside of the life of the family of God, the people who worship Yahweh Elohim, outside of the boundaries of the Mosaic covenant. All would be welcomed. Yes, starting from Jerusalem, but going to all nations, the whole world. Yes, Greeks and Romans. People who've never even heard of Yahweh Elohim are going to be welcome to come and be part of this new family, this new relationship, this open experience of the love of God. Open hearts, open minds, and open doors. Jesus opened their minds to understanding the Scriptures. Jesus opened their hearts by the power of the Holy Spirit in the coming of the Holy Spirit at Pentecost, which we'll celebrate next week. And Jesus opened the doors of the early church to receive not just those who followed the Messiah, the Jews who followed the Messiah, but the God-fearers amongst the Gentiles who were studying the Torah, and not just the God-fearers, but Gentiles from all over the world, many of whom had never heard of God. This openness, this willingness to be open, typified the early church. This open hearts and open minds and open doors is how we are called to live too. As I said in the children's sermon, this church has red doors. And in the history of the church going back several centuries, those red doors, doors like these at churches all over the world, were a symbol to those outside that they could be safe when they came in. They could be safe from oppression. They could be safe from attack. They could come and find sanctuary in the sanctuary behind those doors and know the grace of God and know the love of God and experience the love of God and share the love of God and be present with and within the love of God behind those red doors. It's fitting that Grace United Methodist Church has red doors expressing the safety and welcome of God's presence right here, today. In a world with violence, in a world with pain, in a world filled with fear, in a world with shootings, including one just a mile away last night, in a world that is struck by pain and violence, my friends, we need the message of the welcoming grace and love of God symbolized by those doors. A welcoming grace that is open to all without exception. Those doors were open to myself and to my husband when we came here wow, a month ago now, to be your pastoral family. You opened those doors and welcomed us in a way that was touching to us, that touched our hearts, that expanded our minds to knowing God's love through you. You, Grace Church, became a means of grace for us. And I want to thank you for that. And I want to challenge us all to continue this practice of being means of grace for others, for those who are outside those doors right now, who need to hear and to know and to receive the good news of God's love that isn't restricted by anything, but is open to all. Just as we celebrated being received, let us always be about opening our doors to others, as God has opened our hearts and our minds. Let God, through us, open the doors again and again and again to those whom God will send to experience love, acceptance, affirmation here. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. And may God's people say, Amen. In your presence.